South Africa has ranked 99th out of 165 nations on the 2022 World Economic Freedom Report. That document measures how policies and institutions of countries support economic freedom. South Africa has moved down 6 spots, we're told, from 2021. So what does this say about our country's economic freedom? Let's unpack the findings of this report with Neil Emerick, who's an associate of the Free Market Foundation, also a contributor to the previous economic freedom reports. He joins us now via our video link from Cape Town. Great to see you, Neil. Thanks very much indeed for your time. I mean, we'll speak about South Africa's position in just a moment. Let's begin by just defining what this report means when it speaks about economic freedom.
Sure. Okay. Well, I mean, it sort of has an ideological bias, of course. There it is in the name. But it's trying to answer the perennial question, which economic philosophy will generate the best outcomes? So, you're in constant contrast between free markets and versus government-directed economies. Now, while there's a lot of theory on both sides, the authors of this report decided that we should test that question empirically. So the report itself is a collection of measurements which can be investigated by anybody. They're available in other reports. They take statistics based on tax rates and inflation rates, the amount of government spend. They've got 42 parameters that they look at. They bring those together in several categories, which we can go into in a bit more detail if you like. And then they average those categories up into a single number. So we're left with a score out of 10 for all the countries across the world. And then what happens is we correlate that number against things that we want to achieve. So things like high economic growth, investment, income levels, reduced poverty levels, and other social goods like literacy, health, longevity, gender rights, and other political rights. So the project, if you like, was to see whether economic freedom was going to score better than, say, a government-directed economy, and those results are now in.
Yeah. All right, and South Africa, it's emerged, has dropped from 93rd to 99th in this ranking. What should we make of that? I mean, it certainly doesn't sound like we're placed, correctly, for lack of a better term, in the 90s, as it were.
Well, it depends which side of the debate you're on.
Right.
If you believe in a developmental state, which our current government does, then the economic freedom has picked up the trend at completely accuracy, and we'd have to say that they've achieved their ends. So when we entered the democratic period from 1995, we were scoring around 46 to 50 on the rankings. So we were on page 1 with the sort of first half of the country's sets in the report. But since that period, 2000, we've consistently gone down in the rankings. Government has got bigger in our lives, regulations got bigger in our lives, and we find ourselves today at 99. And this year we've fallen onto the second page of the report. So just physically it feels a little bit different this year. Right.
And let's speak a bit more about the categories where this country has not done as well as other countries, as it were. I mean, you spoke about an aggregated score of around 10. What were some of the contributing factors that didn't allow South Africa to score as highly as it did previously?
Sure. Well, there's 5 categories. So just quickly, the size of government is, if government is big, it means that they are deciding how to spend our money instead of us. So there's allocation of resources in the market that's taking place by government instead of by private individuals.
Right.
We have the integrity of the legal system, which is crucial for sort of enforcing contracts and private property rights. It's a very, very important category. It's one of the ones that correlates most strongly with everything else. Then there's sound money, which is about inflation. If a government is printing money, again, they're taking choices away from you because often they get the money first, which they can go and spend instead of you. Freedom to trade with other countries. So how difficult do you make it to import and export? And obviously that has implications for local competition and things like that. And then the last category is the regulation of business, labour and credit. So how much red tape is there in the economy? Now, within those 5 categories, we do particularly poorly on the first category, Area 1, size of government. So we're 117th on that one. On the legal system, we're 56th, which is very, very positive. And as I said, that's probably the most important category. So if you do well there, you have to do a lot wrong elsewhere before you have deep problems. Inflation, we haven't done badly. We're 101st. I mean, 6% inflation is still a lot worse than the 2% other countries have been experiencing. So that's why we've ranked poorly there.
Yeah.
People would think that we have an open economy, but there's a lot of barriers to trade and red tape that we deal with. So we're 123rd on the trade index, and then 104th on general regulation. So we only really score well on the legal trade, and we're in the bottom half of all the rest. I don't know, would you like me to just go into particular problems where we score particularly badly?
Well, we'll do that in just a moment, time allowing. What I did want to engage you on, though, Neil, is, we live in an increasingly globalized society. In other words, what happens, for instance, in these, larger economies inevitably will affect what takes place in places like South Africa, and the inflation rate is a case in point. Many economists here at home will tell you that we inherit a lot of our inflation rate because of what's taking place, for instance, now in Eastern Europe. How much of a factor is that when, you determine how a country scores around issues like inflation?
Yeah, personally, I would disagree with that statement. A lot of inflation is driven by how much money the local government prints. So although there would be some imported inflation, what we're interested in is the general price level. So it's possible that we could import oil prices, but that's not going to affect every good in our economy. Inflation represents that rising tide, or rather the depreciating ability to purchase things. So every government is pretty much responsible for its own money supply. And if you don't print money and you have a very sound currency like the Swiss franc or something, then obviously you're not going to see that imported inflation coming through. You're going to be a strong currency. So we do make those choices. It's not that it's happening to us.
Sure. All right. I imagine that's going to spark a lot of debate as well. Perhaps
I hope so.
An invitation for follow-up discussion. We're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid, for today. Thank you so much indeed for giving us the broad strokes of the findings of this report.